Hello everyone. If this is your first time tuning into one of my videos, my name is Sophie Carus, and today I'm going to talk to you guys about sea otters and us. If you don't already know what a sea otter is, we're going to talk about that and similarities between sea otters and humans, and then what we can do to help protect sea otters. So before we get moving on, I want you to think of for a minute. Do you know what a sea otter is? And if you do, what type of animal do you think they are? Would you put them in the group of reptiles? Would you put them in the group of amphibians? Amphibians are like frogs. Would you put them in the group of mammals with us and monkeys? Or would you put them in the group of fish because they live in the sea? Okay, so now that you've thought about that for a minute, sea otters are actually classified as marine mammals. So marine meaning like a subgroup of the mammal group. So we're humans and we are in the mammal group as well, right? But we don't live in the ocean. So they made another group for mammals that live in the ocean, like sea otters, and we'll talk about a couple other examples here in a minute. So in my other video, I talked a little bit about mammals, but I'll talk about it again here. So mammals are warm-blooded. What does that mean? So that means that we get cold really easily, right? So we have to have ways to help regulate our body temperature. As humans, we make clothes that we can put on to protect ourselves. Other mammals like monkeys, they have fur that helps keep them warm if they get cold. And then they can sweat to help cool them down, just like us. Some other animals that have to stay warm are things like seals. So seals, which are a type of marine mammal, they use blubber. So you know the really thick layers of fat, right? So they have really thick layers of fat around their body that helps keep them warm when they swim in the really cold ocean water. So the other key feature of mammals are having a vertebrae. So we have a big long vertebrae. We have a big long back, right? That spine. Sea otters also have that. Okay, so now, what are some examples of marine mammals? So think about that for a minute. What are some other animals that live in the ocean that would also be considered mammals? Two examples I thought of were manatees and whales. So I don't know if you've ever heard of manatees before, but they're those animals shown on the left there. They're very cute, kind of look like hippos, and they kind of just float around in mangroves, very commonly in Florida. So if any of you have ever been to Florida, maybe next time you go, you can ask your parents if you can take a tour and go check out the manatees. They're really, really pretty animals, and they move very slowly in the waters there in Florida. Another type of marine mammal is whales. There's all kinds of whales in the oceans, right? The one shown on this slide on the right are blue whales, and they're very, very, very large whales that live in our oceans. And also shown with the blue whale is a blue whale baby. Okay, so now let's talk about how big are sea otters. So here's a really cute picture on this slide of a sea otter mom grooming her baby. Well, she looks pretty long, right? A little bit of it got cut off, but sea otters can actually be up to 4 feet long. Now, some of you might be 4 feet or taller right now. That's pretty tall, right? They get pretty big. Now, maybe you've seen river otters, which is related to sea otters, but they don't live in the ocean. They live in our rivers and next to riverways. They're a lot smaller than sea otters. Now, there are a couple different types of sea otters. There's some that are called southern, which live off the coast of California, and others that are called northern, which live off the coasts of Alaska and like the state of Washington. Now we'll talk a little bit about that in a couple slides. But the southern sea otters are actually a bit smaller than their northern relatives. The southern sea otters can range from anywhere between 50 to 70 pounds, while the northern sea otters range from 70 to 100 pounds. Maybe you can think about why maybe the northern sea otters are bigger. Think about that for a little bit. Now, I want you to think about which do you think is bigger, the males or the females? So some of you may have guessed males. The males are actually more on the higher weight end for each of the southern and northern types. So for southern, the males are usually more around 70 pounds, while the females are around 50. And northern, the females are around 70, while the males are around 100 pounds. Okay. So what are some other relatives of sea otters? I mentioned river otters. Well, sea otters are also related to ferrets and weasels. That makes sense, right? When you look at these pictures, here on the left is a ferret and on the right is a weasel. They have some similar characteristics, especially in the face, of what a sea otter looks like. So, did you actually know some people have ferrets as pets, which is kind of funny? Okay, so like I said, we're going to talk here about where in the world are these sea otters found. So we talked earlier about the difference between southern sea otters and northern sea otters. Remember I said the southern sea otters lived off the coast of California. So if you can find California in this, I can point to it for you. You should be able to see my pointer here off the coast of California. They are right off the central coast of California. So in the middle of the state, right off the coast, are where the southern river otters are. Now, before they were endangered, they used to live all the way up and down this coast. The northern sea otters live off the coast of Washington, up here, and off the coast of Alaska. Now, there's also a third type of sea otters that I didn't talk about earlier. They're called the Russian sea otters, and they live off the coasts of Russia and Japan in the Pacific Ocean. So here you can see the Pacific Ocean shown on this map, and then to the left of the United States and across the Pacific Ocean, we have the dark blue up here being Russia, and then down here being Japan. So right all along this coastline are also where there are sea otters, specifically the Russian type of sea otters. So now we're going to talk a little bit about where do sea otters live. So sea otters live in kelp forests. Maybe some of you have heard of kelp forests before. So there's a picture on the background of the slide showing looking from under the water at a kelp forest. Kelp plants form very dense forest in certain areas of our oceans, in shallow regions, and they reduce sunlight in certain areas. They are home to a super large variety of ocean life. It's a really important area for a lot of animals. Also called biologically complex, because you have all types of animals that need this kelp forest to grow and live and give birth to their young. Now, each of these kelp forest trees, I guess they look like, they can tower up to 175 feet above the ocean floor. That's really tall. But remember, they only grow in shallow areas of the ocean because they need photosynthesis to grow. Now, someone else I know was doing a video on photosynthesis, so maybe you can check that out after this if you have questions about photosynthesis. So even though they kind of look like trees, they don't actually have any roots, don't really have any stems, leaves, or flowers. Maybe if you've ever walked along a beach before, you've seen that green, really fake looking plant that's on the beach. That's actually usually kelp. You can ask your parents to make sure next time. But if you're walking along the coastline in California and you see this fake looking plant, it's actually kelp. And it's used a lot of times as well for a safe space for young. So other big mammals in the ocean or other big animals like seals, sea lions, and gray whales use the kelp forest to protect their young and raise them safely. So it helps protect them from some of the dangerous animals in the ocean so that they don't get eaten. So, like I said, these forests are very diverse communities of both animals and plants. And the kelp provides a continuous food source for many animals, from turban snails to sea urchins, to even bacteria. So what doesn't get eaten by the sea urchins or snails but drifts off eventually gets broken down by the bacteria in the ocean. So do you guys remember what sea urchins look like? I don't know if any of you have ever seen them at the zoo before or at an aquarium. They're those really spiky looking, scary animals, but they don't really do much. They just eat the kelp. So what is the sea otter's role in these kelp forests then? So the sea otters play a critical role in kelp forests. They help maintain these forests by eating a lot of the animals that eat the forest. So they help maintain the balance of the forest to prevent it from getting eaten too much. If sea otters couldn't eat sea urchins, the sea urchins would just eat all of the kelp forest and there wouldn't be anything left for any of the other things that the kelp forest is used for. So there wouldn't be any forest left to help protect the young like we talked about, or to provide resources for other fish and animals in the ocean. So sea otters play a very important role in maintaining the forest. It's almost like they're the conservation protectors of the kelp forest. And actually, also funny, sea otters will wrap themselves up in the kelp at the top to float and take a little nap or go to sleep so that they don't drift too far out into the ocean. All right, so let's talk a little bit about what a sea otter eats. So like I mentioned on the previous slide, they eat sea urchins, snails, crabs. So sometimes, I don't know about you, but I get hungry during the day between meals and I kind of want a snack. Well, funny, but sea otters also do, and they can actually keep snacks in little pouches in their armpits. So it's hard to see in this picture, but I'll share with you some websites at the end if you ask your parents you can go to. They can help you find some videos that you can see sea otters putting things in their armpits to collect and hold them. But sea otters, they can put some of their food or snacks or rocks or whatever into their armpit pouches and protect them while they swim around or dive or use their hands for something else. So that's kind of a fun fact. But eating these animals listed on this slide, the sea urchin, snails, crabs, like I said, they helped keep that kelp forest from being overgrazed and protect it for all the other animals that need to use it. Now, right here on this slide, I'm just talking about the southern sea otters, but the northern sea otters can also eat fish. Additionally, sea otters have a very high metabolism. So this is one of the ways that they are able to keep themselves warm in the icy cold waters of the ocean. I don't know if any of you have ever been in the Pacific Ocean, but it's a very cold ocean. So one way they can stay warm is with their high metabolism. What does that mean? That means that they're constantly burning through food to produce heat to keep their body warm. That means they have to eat about a quarter of their body weight in food each day. That's a lot of food. Can you guess about how many pounds of food that would be for an adult to eat each day? So a 150-pound adult would have to eat 35 to 40 pounds of food a day to match that. I don't know about you, but that's a lot of food. We probably don't eat more than a couple pounds of food a day, if that. Okay, so another way that sea otters stay warm, like we said on the previous slide, they use their metabolism, but also their fur. Sea otters have the world's densest fur. Now, we'll get back to this in a couple more slides, the importance of that. it's actually more than 1 million hairs per square inch. So if you have a ruler or your parents have a tape measure or something, you can see how big an inch is, and then make a square out of that inch. And in that little square, they have more than 1 million hairs. Now, how many hairs do we have as humans on our head? We have 100,000 hairs or less on our whole head. Now, maybe if your dad's bald, he doesn't have that much hair. But on average, as humans, it's only about 100,000 hairs or less, which is just 1/10 or 10% of a square inch on an otter. That's a lot of fur that otters have. So remember earlier I was saying how other marine mammals like seals use blubber to help stay warm? Well, instead of using blubber, this really thick fur acts really well instead to help keep these otters warm. And their coat is also waterproof thanks to some oils produced by their skin. But they have to maintain their coat every single day. It takes hours of grooming every day for a sea otter to make sure that their coat is well maintained to help keep them warm. So if you've ever seen videos of sea otters just constantly grooming, that's why, because it's super important to help them stay warm and help them stay buoyant so that buoyant means float, so that they can float on top of the water. So during these hours, they fluff their fur a little bit, and it helps bring the oils off of their skin onto the fur, and also they blow some air bubbles into their fur to fluff it up and help them float. So, and then the picture on this slide too is a picture of a couple otters holding hands. So another way to help them from floating away into the ocean, they wrap up in the sea kelp or hold on to each other. Just like how you or I might hold hands while we're floating in the water in the pool. Okay, so like I was saying, the fur is very important because that's one of the reasons sea otters were hunted so much in our past, to the point that today they're still an endangered species. So during the 1700s and 1800s, right around the time when people from Europe came over to North America, they made their way over to the West Coast in California, and even some people from Asia made their way over to North America. And they noticed there were these animals in the ocean that had this really thick fur, and it helped keep them really warm. If you made coats out of it or boots or whatever, it helped you stay really warm during the cold winters. So unfortunately, the fur trade depleted the sea otter population drastically. That by the time the 1920s hit, they were on the brink of extinction. In fact, there were a lot of people at that time that really thought that all the sea otters were extinct. That was until, thankfully, some were spotted off the coast of Big Sur in California in 1938. So it was really awesome that they were able to find the sea otters. Now, at that time, it was estimated there's only about 50 sea otters right then off the coast of California. But thanks to conservation efforts and a lot of different organizations working together, there are now about 3,000 sea otters off the coast of California, which is awesome. But it's not enough, and we still need to keep working to protect these animals because they're still endangered, and their population has not continued to grow over the past few years. A lot of scientists are trying to figure out why this is, and maybe if you're really interested in it, you could help join them and try to figure out why their population isn't growing as much right now. Now, one of the reasons sea otters have been allowed to flourish is because they've been protected by the Endangered Species Act, just like some other animals in our world. So, sea otters also, you might have heard, use tools. Do you think that's true? I kind of gave it away. They do use tools, just like we use tools, but not exactly. They more take a rock and use it to crack open those clams or sea urchins that they eat. But pretty cool, right? So in this image, you can see a sea otter had cracked something open and looks like he's about to eat it. Now, sometimes they keep rocks that they like I was saying earlier, in their little armpit folds to hold on to them for later. All right, so let's talk about some fun facts for sea otters. Sea otters can actually hold their breath for 6 to 7 minutes. That's pretty long for a mammal, right? Not as long as some other marine mammals, but pretty long. And there's a lot of really cool sea otter surrogacy programs in the United States. So what does surrogacy mean? It means that a sea otter mom who doesn't have a pup helps raise a pup that was abandoned. So a lot of times in California, they notice these sea otter pups just show up and they don't have a mother. And they know if they leave that sea otter pup out there that they won't survive. So what a lot of areas do, like the Monterey Bay Aquarium, they take these sea otter pups in and put them with a sea otter female, and a lot of times they will help raise that pup, which is really cool. So the top picture on this page, sorry, the top picture on this page is actually one of the first mothers at the Monterey Bay Aquarium that helped raise a pup that wasn't her own. So that's a really cool story, and I really encourage you to ask your parents if you can visit the Monterey Bay Aquarium website at the end to look into the stories of a lot of their sea otters, and you can even watch a live stream of their sea otters, which is really cool. Now, another fun fact is they all have unique personalities. So that's another really cool thing you can look at on the Monterey Bay Aquarium website is they have each sea otter that they have right now, and they tell you all about that sea otter and its personality. So some of them are a little more like troublemakers than others, and some are more motherly. And the last one, sea otters also have social groups. So the mothers and pups kind of hang out together out in the wild, while the males hang out in a group as well, but separately. And another interesting fact is when the mothers hunt, they can actually wrap their pups in the kelp and they just kind of float up there like little corks while the mom goes and hunts. So that's kind of fun. And the pups also stay with their mothers for the first 8 months of their lives and need them to survive. Another really cool thing is one thing to think about. So if the pups stay with their mothers for the first 8 months, that's really short, right? We need to stay with our parents for quite a few years before we know what's going on. But the pups also take up to 4 weeks to learn how to swim. That's actually quite a while for a mammal in the ocean. That means that they have to rely on their mothers heavily during those first 4 weeks, which is why things like the surrogacy program are so important. But that is a lot quicker than we learn how to walk, right? A lot of us didn't learn how to walk till we were about a year old, which is a lot longer than the sea otter pups, so we rely on our moms a lot. And the bottom image on this page was a rescued newborn pup at the Monterey Bay Aquarium that's now fully grown. And there she is right there, swimming all on her own and playing with a toy. Okay, so like I mentioned earlier, the Monterey Bay Aquarium works really heavily in conservation for sea otters. And if you go to their website, ask your parents first. If you go to their website, they have a lot of really cool videos explaining what I've already talked about and a lot more. And they have live streams and fun videos about sea otters. So I highly recommend, if your parents will let you, go check out this website and learn more about the sea otters. And last, here were the 2 websites I used. Like I said, that top one there is the Monterey Bay Aquarium, so I highly recommend you ask your parents if you can visit it to learn more about the sea otters. So I hope you enjoyed this presentation, and remember, we're a lot like a lot of other animals in our society, and in our world, I should say, and we should help take care of them. Thank you for listening.